crypto is a fucking distraction, yes? If you only chase the technological advancement and you think it's all about technology, you're not asking the question, should I build this? And now you see 50,000 tokens a day created on pump.fun and the entire crypto industry is dead. If more and more people figure out that there's this parallel system that kind of emphasizes all the flaws in the other system, in the fiat money system, and shows how it's superior, verifiable for everyone, then slowly but surely more people realize that Bitcoin is a superior store of value asset first and a better medium of exchange after. But that is even further down the road, I think. It feels like I've seen everything before, like everything where we are now. The sentiment is very down, the FUD is very high. We have this correction and people think it's over. This is all part of it. A better money is a way more interesting endpoint than building the next technological thing. That's a distraction.
I want to start with you because you have 1.5 years, not a podcast. I think that's around it.
Yeah.
And you went from having a podcast to also getting more and more into the podcast. Now, actually, also working for a Bitcoin company. If I got that right, how has been your Bitcoin journey so far, and how have you seen Bitcoin developing over the last year since we recorded the last episode?
Yeah, really fun to think about that, right? That the time actually goes pretty fast. But I also feel that the development of Bitcoin is going really fast, right? Like I've been in Bitcoin a bit longer than you, but it feels like I've seen everything before, like everything where we are now. You know, the sentiment is very down, the FUD is very high. You know, we have this correction and people think it's over, but this is all part of it, right? And like. What has helped me doing the podcast, and I think you have a similar experience, right? Just talking to so many interesting, smart, motivated people that all in their own way and through their own motivations and experiences, right? They are focusing their energy on Bitcoin, and that figuring that out or finding that out or feeling that movement basically. I think really helps me also in my conviction, right? Like it's not just me, I'm not crazy and you are not crazy, right? There's many people that are seeing the problem of fiat money and are curious enough to study, to figure out Bitcoin, and they decide to focus their energy on it. And I think we are in a great flow with Bitcoin. A lot of stuff is happening. Of course, recently we had the really big news of the American, strategic Bitcoin reserve, which if I think back 10 years, that would have been a wet pipe dream, So we're seeing that, and I think personally, just focusing my energy on Bitcoin has been amazing. Actually, like I think about this when I wake up, and I love that. Yeah, just through my own output and enthusiasm, I've been able to create more time and space to even focus on it more. So I think it's very rewarding. And again, I think you have a similar experience, but people sending me messages and comments on YouTube saying that, I really helped them in their journey and pointed them in certain directions for them to learn more. Yeah, that's just super, super gratifying, actually. And I'm very grateful that just by surfacing my own curiosity, right? Just talking to other people, having interesting conversations that I already learned from. And then when you put it out on the internet, you can actually reach way more people. Like I've always called that in my startup age in my career, like the magic of the internet. But with creating content, it's the same. Like you never know how far a conversation reaches or what triggers which person, and it's just really nice to see that that feedback. So I have to say, like, it's just really rewarding, and I know that it's the right decision to focus more on Bitcoin.
It's super interesting. For me, it actually was Jeff Proof, the conversation I had with him. Was there a moment for you where you realized I have to not only put my money but also my time more into Bitcoin, because there's like a huge differential?
Yes.
A lot of people put that money but not their time in Bitcoin.
Yes, I saw. I have a very distinct moment where I realized I saw Bob Burnett, who's boomer underscore BTC on Twitter X. Well, he's a boomer, so he's somewhere in late 60s, and he shared on a podcast something like, Bitcoin is the biggest thing that you could spend your time and energy on in your life, right? Like it's the biggest discovery of our lifetime, and it's so profound that like the rest of your life you're going to think about this. So there isn't a better way to spend your time and energy than on this. And when I heard, he said something like that, and when I heard that, I was like, yeah, I am going to think about this for the rest of my life. Bitcoin is not going away. The value that I'm getting from having adopted it is not going away. And I want to see where this ends up. But I also realized that it's not inevitable, right? It's also interesting. Like whenever someone said that, like, oh, Bitcoin is inevitable, I never really liked that, because you have to keep talking about Bitcoin. I tweet that a lot, like, don't stop talking about Bitcoin. It is inevitable because it exists, but if you think about it in a kind of like a philosophical way, we are manifesting it. You and I are talking about it. Like Bitcoin was an idea in the beginning, and it was released, on a random internet forum, and people picked it up. Like the entire growth is really organic, but it comes from people that focus their time and energy on either making it better or adopting it in a certain way, or teaching other people about it, right? And I feel like Bitcoin is like a decentralized collective manifestation of this idea. But it's only inevitable if we don't stop talking about it. Like we have to keep focusing and pointing our energy towards that. And then we will also see that it does accelerate, right? I heard a really interesting reflection from Simon Dixon on the whole strategic Bitcoin reserve and how we basically manifested that into existence, or memed it into existence, right? Every time any official text came out about like the crypto stockpile with Cardano and ETH and whatever, like people pile onto that on X. And the people that are in charge of creating this legislation, right, like David Sachs or Lutnick, or the younger people that are connected in the administration, they read that stuff. Like you can reach those people, and so there's such a big force that is saying Bitcoin only, Bitcoin only. Bitcoin is the most profound discovery of our lifetime, right? This is how you can save America. Well, in this context, right? And they read it, they notice it, and eventually many people, when they read this SBR, legislation or draft legislation or the whole executive order, they're like, yeah, this is even better than we hoped for. But that is because we talk about it, and I think that is just such a fascinating thing, and that's also why I'm happy that you have a podcast. We need even more Bitcoin podcasts. Like we should just never stop talking about this thing, because it will take a lot of time for Bitcoin to really beat fiat money, in my opinion. The undertaking of, having a superior form of money, a superior savings tool be adopted by the world is probably one of the biggest undertakings of any new technology. Right, it's the biggest thing. The whole question of what is money, no one ever asks that themselves, right? I think you know that as well from your conversations, and it's so big that we have to keep in mind that it will take some time, and therefore we need to spend a lot of time helping to manifest this idea further and further into existence. And so I hope that's an answer to the question, actually. But yeah, I had this profound moment where Bob Burnett said that, and now I just realized this is a good decision, because you cannot unsee Bitcoin, right? Like you have to, if you think this is going to change the world, you are invited in such a strong and positive way to contribute to that when you do it, it doesn't even feel like work or something. It feels like something you are supposed to do.
That's super interesting, and it's also that there's a lot in there. The first thing that I want to tackle in there is I always frame it as we are digital soldiers, like we are in an information war and not like in an actual war. I mean, there's still actual war, but most of the wars are now fight on Twitter and YouTube and podcasting, but because there are different groups with different ideas and everyone wants to push their ideas. And you are totally right. If we are becoming complacent and we are just stop, that's why I also don't like the idea of everyone using Nostra and no longer Twitter and YouTube, because we have to be where most people are on Twitter. Or Nostra, there are enough orange pillars already. I don't feel a big need to go on Nostra. Sometimes I'm there, but there you can convert the least amount of Bitcoiners because most people are already there. And the most people who actually reach on places like, I think, LinkedIn and TikTok, there you have probably the most no coiners, and we are the digital soldiers in that war. Which is also interesting. Since I've been in the Bitcoin content space, my knowledge about Bitcoin grew exponentially. Like I thought I knew Bitcoin before. Now I know I didn't knew anything. How has been your experience in the past year with like interviewing so many people and actually growing your own knowledge around Bitcoin?
Yeah, great question. I love that. To touch back on the war part, I also got the word war from Tuur de Meester, and he said, I'm going to use the word war more. And I agree. It's a battle, right? It's a battle of ideas. The entire world is a battleground of ideas. And for me, that started when I realized, the people in the government are just other people, and they also have their own ideas. They have an idea of what they want to achieve. Many also don't, and they just, compromise and they follow a system, as also many people outside of the government, right? But the whole world is a battle of ideas. And if you think about that combined with, you can just do things, then it becomes obvious that if you have a solid idea and you have many people that understand this idea and they all talk and share about this idea in their own unique way, they will in time reach more people that identify with how those people share it, right? So we have somewhat of a similar audience, but I think also a very different audience, because how I talk about Bitcoin clicks different with people than how you talk about Bitcoin. And that's an amazing thing. Like, that's why I just said, like, we need more Bitcoin podcasts, because it's really hard to have like one unified story around Bitcoin, because money touches all these aspects of our lives and nobody really knows what money is, right? We just mentioned that. And so this is such a big topic that I think it's actually really great that there are so many people in a decentralized way, right? Like what I said, we are manifesting this as a decentralized collective, but we don't even know all the people that contribute to the manifestation of Bitcoin, which doesn't really matter also, right? And I just love that idea. And I agree with you. It's really a battle, because if you see, for example, in Europe, they want to launch their CBDC in October or something. We had was this video from Christine Lagarde. Like, that is also an idea. They think that's a great idea for whatever reason. And I think we shouldn't really talk only about why it's bad, because that's only finger pointing. We should explain why Bitcoin is the escape hatch for many people to escape this digital money prison, basically, that they want to start up. And so I agree with you, and I'm happy that we are both part of this, this decentralized collective. And to go to your question, like, when you talk to other people, it's actually, I love being on this side of the conversation, because those are moments where I get to like synthesize my own thoughts that I had, but that are also shaped by the conversations that I had with other people. And so I think that like having a podcast is a really nice, I'd say, intellectual undertaking, because you are constantly testing your own ideas and sharpening your own mind basically around this topic that is not hard. There are no hard definitions. Does that make sense? So it's my interpretation and how I translate it and then share it with other people that touches certain people, like I just said, and you do the same. And so I think that having discussions and conversations around this actually helps everyone involved. So not only the people having the conversation like you and me, but also all the listeners into just like shaping their thoughts. And what I love mainly about Bitcoin is that it's really about your own curiosity and your own study. Like if you're listening to this, like don't believe me when I say I think Bitcoin is the most profound technological discovery of our lifetimes, or whatever Robin is going to say. The beauty of Bitcoin is that you can research and verify everything for yourself. I've also tweeted, I sent you this tweet, right? Like Bitcoin is an asymmetrical opportunity based on publicly available information, but you have to do the work. You have to do the study. And that is just really important. And I think having conversations like this and how we have them on our podcast is eventually beneficial for everyone. And I just love doing it. Like I would do it privately, but I think it's more beneficial if we share it on the internet and hopefully help other people.
Yeah, that's amazing. I always compare it. Someone recently asked me, someone that completely knew nothing about me, and he asked me, "Oh, what is your job?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a student."
Because I love that.
Because that's basically what I do. I just ask questions all day long. And I was studying the past year 500 hours on my podcast with so many people. And I think that's the framing that I usually do. And I like that way more. I'm like, oh, what are you studying? Oh, I study Bitcoin. Oh, what university is allowing that? Then YouTube.
Yeah. Amazing. I love that.
But that's just how I look at that. And it's also really interesting. Every time I speak with people outside of Bitcoin, I realize how freaking early we are.
Yeah.
Do you have some framework to think about to give people an understanding of how early we actually are in terms of adoption?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. I want to say that I am very optimistic about Bitcoin and where it goes, but I also think it will take a long time. Is a weird thing to say, because that a long is different for everyone. But like I said, I think the challenge that Bitcoin is on, replacing the broken fiat money system and showing I see Bitcoin kind of like acting as a mirror, right? Because it just exists. That's why, as Parker Lewis says, Bitcoin is not a hedge. Bitcoin is an entirely different system that you can move to. And as long as that system exists, it is a mirror for the fiat money system. So these two systems, they just exist next to each other. And what we just talked about, right? Podcasts and educational efforts and meetups and stuff like that, is to show people, hey, there is this other thing and it works like this and this. And it's different than, the fiat money system because of XYZ. And that's basically the only thing we can do, because all these individual people need to think for themselves, basically, and compare for themselves what they want to do. Because once you understand Bitcoin, you cannot unsee it, right? And so it still exists, and there are more and more people. You can see people move towards this new system. There's, for example, this Mexican billionaire, Ricardo Salinas. He says, like, I have 70 or 80% of my net worth in Bitcoin. For me, that's a huge signal. Doesn't mean I blindly move to Bitcoin, but it does solidify that there are very intelligent people that are focusing their time and energy more and more on Bitcoin, right? But my point is that there's only so much that you can do for a certain individual, and then they have to do their own work and take their own leap and make their own decisions, etc. So I think that will take some time. Maybe I'd love to get your answer on this, but I think there's only like 100,000 people in the world that really understand Bitcoin. I think at the level that we are at. So I'd love to hear your number, but I've talked to people and they're like, no, I think 10,000. There's other people that say like, few million. So it's funny. It's like that's a big range. It's a big range. But I also don't know. So on one side, I think it's going to take very long because it's individual, right? It's individual after individual after individual. And what is nice, what is a good thing about that is that, governments and big corporations, etc., are all comprised of individuals, right? And so slowly but surely, once you see Bitcoin and you cannot unsee it, but you are like active in your Fiat job and you have like stupid meetings with 12 people that are talking about nonsense and you're just sitting there like, what the fuck am I doing? Don't they know that, the money that they work for is created by other people infinitely, and that's a bad trade and, whatever. Like, so slowly but surely you're going to walk into not only yourself, but also the environment that you're in. And then eventually you get to a point where you have to, you have that matrix moment, red pill, blue pill, and the blue pill is basically just going back to the old life, pretending you don't know that there's another thing that exists. And I'd say if you're honest enough, you can never, ever take the blue pill. Like the blue pill is the worst decision that you can make because you're basically cheating yourself. There's a way out of the cage or the cave, Plato's cave that you're in, and you're consciously deciding not to pursue what is the harder path. You're deciding to take the easy path, but eventually that will create a hard life for you because you will still kind of like peak at Bitcoin. You see people that adopt Bitcoin. I think we are all happier. Everyone is making babies. Everyone is positive about the future. Everyone is improving their wealth, right? And so because it's such an individual journey, I think it will take a long time. I cannot really define long, but I think it is definitely 1 or 2 generations before I'd say Bitcoin is really embedded in society, right? If the children that are like 5 now turn 18 or let's say 25, they grow up in a world where Bitcoin as that mirror has constantly existed, right? And so they will get to a certain point where they have to decide, which money am I going to use? What am I going to use to save for my future, etc.? And I think I'm really interested to see where that goes and what will happen. But if you then research, right, just Bitcoin is the most rational and logical conclusion that you will end up with. But you have to get to that point where you are actually investigating that. So I think that takes a long time. On the other side, I do think because of the absolute scarcity in Bitcoin, this concept of a supply shock where growing and growing demand meets this basically wall of hodlers, because long-term hodlers, I think like 60% or something of all the Bitcoin hasn't moved in 3 years. Like all these people know what this is, and I think that percentage is very high actually. And so there will come a point where continuous buying from either more individuals or larger entities, I think it'll be larger entities, will result in a supply shock that will really blow up the price. And I'm not really a price person, so I don't know what the target is, right? But yeah, that is just logical, right? It'll hit a certain wall of hodlers that are like, sell my Bitcoin for what? Whatever the price. Because I'd say the smart hodlers will eventually move towards borrowing dirty fiat against their Bitcoin, and they will never sell the Bitcoin. I think they will participate in a Bitcoin economy, but they will never sell the Bitcoin for fiat again. And just logically reasoning, I think there will be a point in the future that is within the next 10 years where we will see one or many of those supply shocks, basically, where it will become clear that this absolute finite asset has a growing demand, an unstoppable demand that will show its value in, preserving wealth, and that eventually will also make that the price will blow, will go to the upside. So I'm kind of torn in between. Does that make sense?
There are so many interesting things in there. First of all, because I think I didn't show it too much in the podcast. There is something, as you pointed to, there's hodl waves where you can actually see like how long the hodl periods are. I think those charts are just really cool to see, and you can see like the hodl periods, 10 years. Obviously, it's only starting 2015, and so it's like,
so if you go to 2-3 or 3-5, if you go to 3-5, I'd say 2-3 are definitely people that understand what this is, right? So anything above, I'd say, let's say everything above 3 years, I would say those are people that know what this is. They went through the whole drawdown, they went back up, they have it now, a second big drawdown, or maybe even a third, actually. Yeah, then you know what this is. So I don't know. Can you go there, like between like three and up?
You mean here?
Yeah, and then we have to count the other ones, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but this is probably towards 60% ish.
Exactly.
Total.
Yeah. And that's super interesting of the hodl waves. There's also one aspect that I don't know how or if they captured even, because in my now almost 5-year journey in Bitcoin have changed my custody setup multiple times. So I basically transferred my Bitcoin to other wallets. So on chain, it seems like I sold or moved my Bitcoin every other year. So if you even take that into account, I think the numbers of Bitcoin hodlers that actually are hodling is probably even bigger than those hodl waves. But this gives a rough estimation where we are. So that's super interesting. And to your question, that because I think it's an interesting question of how many people actually understand Bitcoin. I have two ways to look at that, and I look at from down of like, okay, how many are there at minimum, and from what I see, there are at least 1,000 people that are that at least speaking publicly around Bitcoin. So I think that's kind of for me the minimum amount of people that understand Bitcoin, and then from okay, what is kind of the maximum number of how many people understand actually Bitcoin? Treasure actually published something interesting at the last year of Bitcoin Prague conference. They said from all the Bitcoiners out there, only 2% have a hardware wallet. And I was super shocked at that number, and I was not believing it, honestly. But I believe that Treasure have done good research. So if we assume that number is actually correct, 2% of like, let's say 100 million people or 150 million people, around 3 million people, 3 million devices, or 3 million people that did it. So my absolute maximum of how many people actually understood it would not be 3 million, because not everyone that just bought a Treasure or a hardware wallet has understand Bitcoin. So I think 1 million people is probably the maximum of how many people understood it. So I think 100,000 is actually a good guess, somewhere in the middle range of like how many people are speaking publicly about it, how many people have some kind of a self-custody setup, and somewhere in between is probably the truth. It's obviously impossible to know exactly. But
I have a fun addition to that. I think I'm looking it up now. If I look up the Helfini tweet running Bitcoin.
Let's take a break for a moment and appreciate the beauty that Coin Vigilante has made with the Bitcoin watches. Those watches are the most amazing, the most elegant way of showing that you are a true Bitcoiner. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there. And of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. And now if you have Bitcoin, I really do hope that you don't have it on exchange. But if you do have it on exchange, I have two ways for you to deal with that. The first way is you put it on a hardware wallet. That's the entry for you to get into the self-custody game. I recommend Bitbox, Bitcoin only edition for that. It's a super simple and secure way. And if you check out the link in the description, you even get 5% off if you use the code Robin. And the second way is the Bitcoin Way. The Bitcoin Way is your all-in partner in terms of how to get the most out of your sovereignty. They will personalize for you a self-custody setup that is perfect for your individual situation. They will show you how you can secure your own devices. Securing your Bitcoin is not enough. You also have to keep all your devices secure. One topic that is overlooked often is the inheritance plan. What happens with your Bitcoin once you are no longer here? Do you have a plan for that in place already? And last but not least, if you're in the jurisdictions where you don't feel safe, it's better to get a plan B. For all that, head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin to get a 30-minute free call. And just a quick side note, I will be for the first time ever speaking at the Bitcoin Prague event in June. It will be absolutely legendary and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you there. You can get your ticket in the link down in the description of Bitcoin Prague, and very important, use code Robin to get 10% off your ticket. I'm really looking forward seeing you there.
I saw a tweet of someone who posted this famous tweet, right, from January 11, 2009. Hal Finney says, running Bitcoin. It has 125,000 likes. So I'd say, if you know that history, if you know the significance of that post and you like it, then you probably are deep into Bitcoin to a degree where you understand it. I'm doing air quotes because can you fully understand it? No. When I say, that understand Bitcoin, I'd say the profoundness and the possible impact, the profoundness of the discovery and the possible impact on the world. Yeah, 125K people that like that post, I think comes close,
Yeah, then you add a small amount of people that might not have liked it or just seen it or might just not be on Twitter. So like 100 to 200K. Why not?
Exactly.
That's a good reasonable guess. I love that actually. Looking at that number.
Yeah, that was a good post. Maybe something fun to add because I have a friend in real life that you also talked to on the podcast, Lau. Who I think there was a really interesting episode with you and Lau, by the way, because Lau has done lots and lots of historical research also on, the failures of certain monetary systems and a lot also about Weimar Republic, etc. And so I would invite anyone to check out that episode that you two had, because I liked my conversation with him too, but I think yours was even better. He sees Bitcoin as, when I talk to him, the idea of Bitcoin in my head and the impact on the world grows because I talk with him. Like he sees it even bigger, right? And when we connect that, to how early we are and what the upside potential is, what is the asymmetrical opportunity that people have based on public information, is that if you think about, and also another thing comes into play here, the full potential value blog post by Jesse Myers, Bitcoin's full potential value. Everyone should check that out. Maybe some people know the image with the little blocks, like where what is all the wealth in the world? It's like 900 trillion. Half of that is cash, and then the other half is like stored in real estate, art, stocks, etc., gold. And his full potential valuation is 200 trillion for Bitcoin, which is 100x, right? Which is 10 million per Bitcoin. And How he explains that is, what we just talked about. If more and more people figure out that there's this parallel system that kind of emphasizes all the flaws in the other system, in the fiat money system, and shows how it's superior, verifiable for everyone, then slowly but surely, more people realize that Bitcoin is a superior store of value asset first, and a better medium of exchange after. But that is even further down the road, I think, because the store of value use case is the most clear for people right now. Saving is dead. If you really want to invest, you have to make like 13+% on your money in the stock market if you really want to combat the monetary debasement of the last 10 years, right? So anyway, the point is, slowly but surely, like I just shared, more and more people will figure out, hey, this Bitcoin thing is a better way to store my value. And Jesse's piece is about getting to 200 trillion based on fairly conservative estimates about, how much of a percentage will go away from art or from other collectibles or gold or homes, etc. Well, he ends up with 200 trillion as what has been stored in Bitcoin, which eventually gets to 10 million per Bitcoin, although we know a lot of Bitcoin are lost, right? So it's probably closer to like 12, 13 million per Bitcoin. But the point is, when I talk to Lau, he says, if you realize that probably less than 1 million people right now in the entire world have 1 Bitcoin, and you think that what Jesse talks about, where we are moving or how much value is going to move into Bitcoin, the fact that you are here and you are one of those 1 million people, I love the British HODL message of get to 1 Bitcoin. Having 1 Bitcoin is more special than being a millionaire already, numbers wise, okay? Because there are 57 or 60 million millionaires in the world, and if there's only 1 million people that have 1 Bitcoin, it's extremely special to have 1 Bitcoin. And there will be a moment where more millionaires will figure that out. I've now used this argument on 3 millionaires, asking them, how many millionaires do you think there are in the world? 57 or 60 million, I say. And how many Bitcoin are there? 21 million. Okay. So if you want the Bitcoin, if you have a Bitcoin and you talk to another millionaire, you can be like, oh, that's a nice new Porsche. But do you have 1 Bitcoin? No, I do. And then you can tell that to that other person. I've used this as an argument and it's worked. That's funny. It's like an ego thing. But the point is more when Lau talks about this, he talks about, you can almost not imagine how big of a deal it is if Bitcoin actually gets to that 200 trillion market cap. If all that value is stored in Bitcoin, that solidifies Bitcoin in our society, in our world. And if you are here right now and you do the work and you study and you adopt Bitcoin right now and you do everything in your power by spending your time and energy on earning money and turning that into Bitcoin, you will eventually get to a level of wealth that you cannot imagine. And Lau always talks about, we will all have our private chefs, our private doctors, our private contractors, all these things. And all these people will be Bitcoiners. And I just love it when I talk to him. That's eventually my point. And also why I like having discussions about Bitcoin is you get challenged so much about thinking about, okay, how big is this? And again, going back to that question of what is money and what are all the things that it touches, right? What if we can actually show more people that this is a superior money system and they all move there? What does that implicate? What happens then, And for me, that's just been really rewarding in an intellectual way. Like it's just really enjoyable and a very positive and intriguing thing to research and pursue. And when someone else puts a concept so big in my head of where Bitcoin can go, I'm like instantly energized again, and I have this like renewed enthusiasm to also go out and figure out like, okay, could this really be it? Why does he say that? And so it's just a rabbit hole that keeps on going in that sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's kind of it's so great when you have those Bitcoin conversations and you're like, oh, like it makes so much sense. But what I see is that people don't even get the problem. Like the solution Bitcoin is then the next step, but it's almost hard to explain, especially in the Western world where it's still fine. Like inflation is bad, but people think it's just temporary. It will go off again. It's just because of Ukraine war. And like I heard that saying a lot. They almost they don't even get the problem. Then it's really hard to understand the solution. How has been your experience with with getting people to understand the problem, especially in the Western world?
I mean, the figure that I just mentioned, I saw Tad Smith, who's the former CEO of Sotheby's. He was on a podcast with Tim Kotzman, and it was this clip that went pretty viral from that podcast where he explained. So he's a business guy. He ran multiple, billion-dollar companies, and he's actually a business professor. And he said it took me until I was like 55 to figure out that if the money supply is increased by a little over 10%, each year in real terms, and the return of the S&P 500 is 9 point something percent, that I'm actually losing purchasing power. So even with all that background and all that experience, plus the age, right? It took him to his late 50s to figure that out. And when I hear things like that, I think I have more empathy for people that don't understand it yet, because I also feel very lucky that I figured that out in some way before I'm 55, and I'm able to act on it. But yeah, I was never taught about money or finance or economics. And I mean, I've talked to people who are masters in economics, and they tell me, yeah, I was calculating units and stuff, in my study, but we never really discussed what money is. And I mean, if a master's in economics has never learned that, then how can you expect that, a general person like you and me, that we would know that, right? As early as possible, I'd say, in like the adolescence part or the working part of your life, where actually money becomes a thing in your life, And so, this is also how I think, like, you don't pitch Bitcoin, right? You don't say, oh, it's a better money or something like that, because most people don't even know what money is. They think, the banknotes in their pocket are money, but that's not money, and yeah, I think this is what we should focus on more eventually. And I don't know if you talked to him yet. I think I have a recording scheduled with Joe Bryan, who made a video called What's the Problem on YouTube. And I think it's called What's the Problem? Why We All Need Bitcoin. I think you should drop the Why We All Need Bitcoin part from the title and make something more like What's the Problem with Money, or something like that. That to me has been the best explainer video that I've seen in the past 10 years, I'd say, really to a level where people can follow a story and see the implications of certain decisions for picking a certain money system. It's a little story revolving around a crash on an island, and there's two groups of people and they each adopt a different money. And he doesn't even mention Bitcoin until like the last 60 seconds, which is great. But yeah, even a video like that, maybe, I don't know, it has 150,000, 200,000 views, and in the global scale, that's nothing yet, although the content is really, really good. And for many people, I'd say it would be a real eye-opener after they watch it. It's literally 31 minutes, right? So who cannot watch a video of 31 minutes and pay attention? That's why I say it's an asymmetric opportunity based on public information. You can actually find all the information. All the information is there, and to different degrees and levels. There's people on YouTube and analysts on Twitter that share, the insights from their expertise. And as long as you are curious and really, I know you have to put in the time, but eventually you are able to put everything together based on this public information. But if I'm honest, it's just really hard. It's really hard.
That video is actually really good. As soon as I saw it, I sent it actually to my sister.
Oh, and?
Because I was like, hey,
Yes,
maybe it triggers something, like what's the problem? And yeah, I did already, I think a month ago with him, a video. He's not only in the video, with what's the problem, really good in explaining it, and is very professional. He's also a great speaker actually, and a great podcast guest. He was now on so many podcasts already, and he was on mine also on a month ago. And he's really good. I also watched other podcasts with him, and he's really good in like coming up with new ideas, and like he's a great speaker. I think he's really underrated actually, in terms of the Bitcoin speakers. And he is making it understandable what as the title said, what's the problem, and what I understand, like why is Fiat so bad, and he really nicely covers that area. And I think that's a great video of not this the original one, the 39-minute one of his what's the problem. That's just an amazing video. If ever someone tells you, or like, hey, like what's the problem with the Fiat system, or someone really doesn't get it, just send him this video. And if he actually cares and watches it, there's no way he's honest and open to the idea and watches 39 minutes of that and still doesn't see it. He has to have an agenda, or not being open to it, to actually not see it after watching this video. I think it couldn't be clearer than that.
Yeah, I fully agree, but that's also why I said, like, if even this video is a little red pill. I mean, if you watch this video really with attention, the conclusion that you get from it is really messed up, actually. The understanding you can get from just watching this video is pretty messed up. And yeah, like I said, I think it's already a little red pill, because if you just think like, okay, so if what he is sharing here is, you know, an illustration of how the world that I'm personally acting in is actually constructed, and I'm forced to use a money that other people that are no smarter than me, that don't really care about my individual life like I care for my individual life, if those people can create that, what I use for money, infinitely, and spend it before I can spend it, and therefore, you know, debase the money that I already have, if that is really true, what do I do about that? That's a crossroad, right? Because ignoring it is also a choice. It's a very bad, is an easy choice, but it's a very bad choice, because you cannot ignore that it's that paradigm is true, right? So you are in that, right? So the only thing you can do is either accept that, and then you are instantly forced to figure out, what am I doing with that, right? So then you have to continue studying or reading or asking questions or listening to podcasts or whatever. So you're instantly on that path, or you ignore it. And even when you go to the grocery store a day later, you know, and you pick a few items, just a quick lunch or a quick dinner, and you have to pay like 50 euros, and you still feel that's wrong. And then you again have that point, right, where you can be like, oh, maybe there's something in this video that I saw, right? That could be true. I need to understand, why is this happening? Or you're still ignoring it, right? And that's, I just love thinking about this, because Bitcoin in that sense is a true ego test. It's like, as long as you keep ignoring it or going actively against it, while you also have the information about, you know, the problem that exists and how it works, the only thing you're sabotaging is yourself, right? It is a true, red pill, blue pill, kind of like ego psychological journey that each individual goes through differently. And if you don't have 33 minutes to watch this video, then I think this video could really change your life. So I would invite everyone to check it out.
It's like one of those videos, like in 39 minutes for the rest of your 39 years or something. You know those videos?
Yeah.
A fun title also for that.
Also, if you look at Joe, for example, right? I was trying to look up his his education actually, because I think he's a physics. He is a physics major, right? So again, a super intelligent person who's actually also very successful in business just decides to put all their attention and energy towards Bitcoin. And if you ask yourself, why is that? Then I think you're also possibly on the first step of your own rabbit hole journey, right? Because there's a reason. Why would you pay attention to something that's not worth paying attention to? So
Lex Friedman said something a few years on the podcast, which kind of stuck with me in my orange pilling story. He said, like, I don't fully yet get Bitcoin, but one thing is clear: every Bitcoiner is super smart that I talk to, and so there has to be something there. And that's an interesting observation that he made. It's also one thing that kind of orange pilled me in my journey of like Lex Friedman. I think Orange was interviewing Saifedean years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really great one also. So like it brings me to I had a different question planned, but do you think that Bitcoin is more a social revolution or a technical one?
Oh, good one. I will answer, but with what we just said, right? Like, there's something going on there, And if you actually, you said there's something going on there, and again, there's only two options. This is kind of how my mind works. Either yes, there's really something going on there, and everything they say, yeah, it's kind of rooted in truth plus reality plus rationality. So, I got to pay attention to this. Or they're all crazy. They're participating in a pyramid scheme or a Ponzi scheme. They're fucking idiots, right? Even Paul Tudor Jones, even Stanley Druckenmiller, even Ricardo Salinas, even Michael Saylor. So it's either or it's the one or the other. Right, and that's what I love. You just mentioned LinkedIn as in talking to people that where you will probably find people that could use Bitcoin the most. Dude, so many haters on LinkedIn, so many crazy like certified financial advisors and blah blah, and they're like, oh, Bitcoin is a Ponzi, Bitcoin is a tulip scheme, Bitcoin is a scam. And again, if we go back to what's the psychological thing that's going on here? It's so easy to dismiss, of course, but if you then see these people use reasoning that's just stupid, they didn't do the work. And so you see self-sabotage in real time, and they're also keeping other people away from honestly investigating, hey, what is going on here? Is there something going on here, right? And so that's kind of how my mind works, that a lot of times you can just bring things back to, it's either this or it's this, right? There's of course, there's a lot of gray in the world, but we are either idiots that are victim to a Ponzi scheme and a pyramid scheme and a cult without, us knowing. We are totally, enchanted by the Bitcoin thing. Or this is really the biggest technological monetary discovery and revolution of our lifetimes. It's one or the other. Of course, I gravitate towards the latter, and you too. But there are many people that just think in that way, and I think it's just such a pity, you should just be. I think I'm happy and I'm lucky that I am wired in a certain way that makes me curious, and so I go on my little rabbit hole journeys. But there are many people that just think like, oh, there's a guy who's something with finance on LinkedIn said it's a pyramid scheme. I'm just not going to pay attention, and still going to pay 50 euros again in the supermarket for a quick lunch, But I just want to mention that because that again is a signal, right? So even if people are listening and think like, oh, what are these guys talking about? I would invite you to just do your own research. Again, you can find everything online. You don't really have to, please do not believe us, right? Like, we are the only cult where we ask people to think for themselves and not follow us, basically. That's always my reply when someone says, you're in a cult, etc. So I just want to add to that because I like that you said that, like, when you think is there something there? That's the signal. Like that's the signal for yourself to like go deeper and deeper. And yeah, because I rambled on this answer, I forgot your question.
No worries. Yeah, it's the open sourceness. And one thing I just add that quickly. Usually when I encounter someone critical or hating on Bitcoin, I don't try to argue with them because usually it's useless. I try to actually understand where they're coming from and what they're saying. So I just ask questions. And what I discovered is after the fourth question, they are in a circle and they just repeat over and over that one argument. So basically after 4 questions, they cannot go deeper. If you ask a Bitcoiner why Bitcoin makes sense, they can go very deep, like question, I don't know, 250 if you have time to do that. I don't know. And that's also one of the signals. Ask a hater. And I don't know if I shared that with you before, but that's actually how I got into Bitcoin. I believe Bitcoin was a scam for 3 years straight, from 2017 to 2020. And then a non-Bitcoiner asked me why I hate Bitcoin. And he asked me so much, even though he was not in Bitcoin, that I was experiencing myself like, oh, like I actually don't have good arguments. And I wanted to find good arguments against Bitcoin and then discover Bitcoin in the process. And so if you just ask haters deeper and deeper questions of like why they hate Bitcoin and what does not make sense, of like just not provoking answers, not provoking questions, otherwise it will just be emotional, but actually curious intellectual questions, you will see that either he goes in defense mode and then it's like the conversation is over, you don't have a chance there, or he actually realizes, oh, like interesting point of like I actually don't have any answers more. So like just asking them is a really good point, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree.
Absolutely. The question, if I remember correctly, that I asked before was if you see Bitcoin as a social revolution or as a technical one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So great question. I think we covered some of that before, right? So, okay. So Bitcoin is this idea, right? That it's actually like 40 or maybe even 70 years in the making, right? From cryptography and all the attempts that people have done at like the different technologies that eventually are combined in Bitcoin. And what I know from, again, the startup part of my career and what we also talked about, you have to, like, you can create a thing in this world that also might have a good, reason of existence and actually be the best solution to the problem that you say it is solving. But if nobody understands why they need it, they will never adopt it, right? So if I have an idea for some startup and I think it's great, it's the best thing in the world, people don't wake up in the morning and think like, hey, I'm going to buy what Bram is making because, that he really knows the problem that I have and he made something that really solves it. Like, that's just not how it works. So for any company, if you have an idea about a product, you have to go into the market and get information as to, how much do you actually understand the market? How much do the people, how much does the market understand about the supposed problem that I think that they are having? And in there somewhere, you will find a match as to how you should talk, right? What's the proposition of your product? What does it solve? What does it do? What does it cost? That matches with the understanding of the problem of the people in the market. Because if they then are confronted with my proposition, they're like, hey, it seems like Bram understands what I'm constantly thinking about, the problem that keeps returning in my head. And so as someone who creates something in the world, you have to understand what people want. And we just talked about that, right? So even if Bitcoin started as this obscure post project, random idea on a random internet forum with people at a fringe of society, right? It might be the best money to ever exist, but if no one knows about it and no one understands why it exists, then it also won't be adopted, right? So yes, the thing that is created, the technological thing that is created, is important. But I'd say it's not the most important part. That social part, people getting educated, doubting their own preconceptions and beliefs and making up their own mind and start thinking for themselves, right? Everything I think we talked about up until this point, I think is more important, because eventually, so not only for the adoption of the technology, but also because, and we also just mentioned this, you cannot unsee this. Like, this is a topic, where if you understand the problem and you make the conscious decision that you do not want to be the person experiencing that problem, which is a continuously debasing currency that makes your future more and more uncertain over time. If you want to solve that problem and consciously make a decision that you want to solve that problem, only then you will see the solution that is Bitcoin, the technical solution that is Bitcoin. There are also competing solutions. There are alternatives to Bitcoin. Doing nothing is an alternative, right? Just a conscious decision of doing nothing is a decision. Going into art or homes or gold, whatever, it's an alternative solution to the same problem. And so Bitcoin is also competing in the marketplace of solutions with all these other solutions, which we think are inferior, but based on the understanding or background or age or whatever of the people in the market, they choose different solutions. And again, to go back to the question about how long does this take, that's why I think it takes a long time, because people are also committed to their solution. We are not switching. You and I are not switching anymore to any other solution. We understand that any other option is inferior to Bitcoin. So we are there. We are there already. But helping people switch from art or gold or real estate or whatever as a solution to their problem, the cash, the money, the currency debasing programmatically over time, that is just a more important thing. So we have to focus on that. That's one. So I think that part is way more important. But also we will see that once people adopt it, and you and I are an example of that, they will help in the amplification of the message and the reasoning behind and the showing the proof and education behind why Bitcoin is a superior solution to the problem that other people don't see yet. So yeah, I think that's my answer there. Like it doesn't matter if Bitcoin is the best solution. It doesn't matter if nobody knows why it should exist. Then it'll die eventually because no one adopts it.
That's why all those forks of it don't exist, because there are a lot of copies of Bitcoin that almost have the same code, but they don't have the social revolution behind their thing. In that's what a lot. I don't want to open that altcoin topic now, but
no. No, this is good. I wanted to go here. That's why crypto is a fucking distraction. Please, clip it or whatever. Crypto is a fucking distraction. Yes. Everyone who's focused on crypto is focusing on the technological aspect, guys. Okay. I'm going to be faster. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be blah. That doesn't matter. This is immaculate conception. Bitcoin is immaculate conception. It works. It is as is. You have to understand and accept that. So if you only focus on making something technological better, there are people in the world that think that is important. That's the blob of money going from one crypto project to the other. That's also what pump.fun now killed. That's funny. Think about this. If you only chase the technological advancement and you think it's all about technology, you're not asking the question, should I build this? People are asking the question, can I build this? Oh yeah, sure, I can build this, and I can just put it into the world. Okay, so let's make a website where you can just launch a token in a minute. That sounds amazing, guys. Let's do it. And now you see 50,000 tokens a day created on pump.fun, and the entire crypto industry is dead. Does that make sense? There's just like a blob of money that was like chasing 1,000 projects, and now they're chasing over 1 million projects, looking for the next big thing. That's why crypto is a distraction. You are focused on technology or some sort of promise because you think that these are all companies trying to, change the world or build a thing or whatever, but it's never happening. I've been in Bitcoin for 10 years. I've been in crypto and following crypto from Ethereum from like $70 or something. Okay. There are no useful crypto projects in the world. There's one, that you have like Sushi Swap and stuff like that. Like they have value because people use it to swap tokens. That makes sense. I think Polymarket is a good example, with freedom of capital combined with freedom of information eventually creates something that has value in the world. But it's 2025 and they're trying for 8 years. Like the technological angle as to why you should go for crypto is nonsense, because there's only one real use case for blockchain, and that is a permissionless blockchain, an open source protocol for everyone. And the only use case for that is money. And so I think it's a real pity that a lot of people that are into technology and forward looking and thinking, they step into this trap of focusing on better technology, where if you think about, a better money is a way more interesting endpoint and thing to focus on than building the next technological thing. That's a distraction. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and it is probably the biggest distraction for Bitcoiners these days. I have so many more questions, but we are coming to the end of the time. I guess we have a lot of more material for a third round down the road someday.
Let's do it.
I have one question that I ask each and every one of my guests, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Oh, I like that. I said in the beginning, that you can just do the things. And that is something that I actually recently learned myself. Like the thought before that was also something that I shared in this conversation. Is just like, the government is just other people, or big corporations is just other people, right? Like they are other people like you and me, and they have their own issues with their body or their mind or their family or their past or their future or their ego or whatever. Like everyone has, my mic is going down. Everyone has something, I always say, right? And once you realize that everyone else is winging it too, right? Everyone else is figuring it out as they go in their life. It also means nobody knows shit, and you can just do the things. So whatever you think you want to do, whatever you think you want to talk about online or build or say, you could just do it, because it doesn't matter what other people think of you, because they also have no clue. There's literally no one that has really, really, really figured it out. And when you realize that, it'll actually have a freeing feeling. And once you then start doing the thing, you will realize that it's true. And so I think that's what people can learn from.
I love that so much. I made that experience a lot in the beginning of the podcast, especially with sponsorships. And I had this, I cannot remember. I don't want to, there was some really famous Bitcoiner. I don't know exactly who it was. And we talked after the podcast, and I was like, it's like, I try to figure that sponsorship and partnership thing out, and I have no clue what to do. And he said something, I've been in the industry for 10 years. I know. Also, the Bitcoin companies have no clue what to do with the podcast. They also don't know what to pay for and stuff like that. So it's very true of like, we all try to figure life out as we go. I like that insight a lot. Really cool. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is.
Okay. Nice.
And your question from the previous guest is, how do you foresee Bitcoin scaling on a technical level? I mean, that would be a whole new podcast, but maybe you have some thoughts around that.
Well, it's interesting. I would love to learn what that means, because as I said, I think the urge that many people have with technology and thinking about what else can I build, what is a cool thing to build, is a very bad attitude. And there are many people also on X that want to build cool stuff on Bitcoin. And I think that's conceptually nice, But I am following what Michael Saylor says a lot. Like, I'm not a proponent of ossification, right? Like, okay, we're gonna stop Bitcoin development, but the way Bitcoin works right now is really great. I'm not gonna say perfect; it's really great. And the fact that it's so narrow, and the whole so I see the goal of Bitcoin. What is the purpose of Bitcoin, right? What's the purpose of the Bitcoin protocol? Is to keep the truth that it guards, to keep that trustworthy, right? So the whole goal is of the network, the miners, right? So the nodes, the miners, etc., is to uphold the integrity of the time chain, right? So if the time chain, right, the truth, the fundamental truth layer of this monetary system, if that is maintained in the correct way as envisioned in the protocol, right, that is all what Bitcoin needs to do. And this is how Jeff Booth says it, right? It has to stay decentralized and secure, because these two things make sure that the integrity of the time chain stays like it is. And you see that all the people that focus on the technology part, for example, speed, right? These are all companies, these are all groups, these are all startups, foundations, whatever. They already fail the integrity part from the beginning, because how can you trust a group of people? Does this make sense? So the integrity of the time chain of Bitcoin is constantly assured by this decentralized network. And that is the most important thing that Bitcoin needs to keep on doing. And so I think we should not fuck with that. That's a very delicate thing. That's what Michael Saylor also says, right? It's like, okay, you built this rocket ship, and then you're going to be like, maybe I'm going to add this or this to the rocket ship, right? But maybe then it blows up. You don't know. So you have to. He doesn't say you shouldn't do it, but you should be very cautious. This is it's not fragile. It's delicate, right? So it's not easily breakable, but delicate. You have to be really how do you say that, like you have to respect what it is right now, and it's not just a cool thing to build more upon. Although on the other side, I do think, the whole concept of Bitcoin being the base layer of value, we should build stuff but on top of Bitcoin. So I think the most important thing technology wise for Bitcoin is to figure out where does the border of L1 and L2, where is that? Because yes, we should improve the L1, the base layer, and fix bugs and stuff like that. But building the cool stuff on the base layer, I think I'm not a big proponent of. I think it's very delicate. So I think just focus more on L2. What next to Lightning, what are all the other things that we could build on an L2 that utilize this truth ledger, and how does that connect to real use cases out in the world, right? What we talked about, how does that connect to the real problems that are there? And for example, I don't know if is that called True Vote? I think there's a company that does voting on Bitcoin. So keeping the records of elections on Bitcoin. I think that's called truevote.org. I hope I don't butcher that. But yeah, that's kind of my thought on the technological part. But it's interesting. So for the person that asked the question, think about where does this come from? And for anyone listening to this, like, think about where does that come from? Why do you want to build more stuff? That's never the true solution, I'd say.
Absolutely, and it's like we have to scale with layers, otherwise we destroy the security and the decentralization of Bitcoin. It's a very important point, and also takes people a long time sometimes to figure that out.
I think so, but I mean that's part of Bitcoin. It's just the rabbit hole goes deep and wide at the same time, right?
Absolutely. Really cool. Thank you so much, Bram, for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, see your podcast?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks again for having me on. I always like talking to you. People can find me on X. I'm Bram K. That's BRAMK. My podcast is called Bitcoin for Millennials, and you can find that on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Fountain, wherever you listen to your podcast.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.
Cheers.